Nous devons nous occuper de l'Afrique, raison pour laquelle la Commission a lancé un plan d'investissement.
Ωραία. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Κύριε Επίτροπε, κύριε εκπρόσωπε της Ευρωπαϊκής Επιτροπής στην Ελλάδα, κυρίες και κύριοι, θα ήθελα να σας καλωσορίσω στο Σεράφειο συγκρότημα του Δήμου Αθηναίων και να ευχηθώ ο διάλογος που θα ακολουθήσει να είναι γόνιμος και διαφωτιστικός σχετικά με τις επερχόμενες ευρωπαϊκές εκλογές και τα θέματα που αυτές καλούνται να αντιμετωπίσουν, αλλά και το μέλλον της Ευρώπης γενικότερα. Εμείς οι παλιότεροι γνωρίζουμε πολύ καλά ότι η ζωή των νέων θα ήταν πολύ διαφορετική χωρίς την Ευρώπη, χωρίς το πρόγραμμα Εράσμους, χωρίς το Ίντερρεϊλ, χωρίς έναν ολόκληρο κόσμο ευκαιριών για τους νέους να ταξιδέψουν και να σπουδάσουν σε 28 χώρες. Και πάνω απ' όλα, χωρίς την απίστευτη τύχη να μπορείς να προγραμματίσεις το ταξίδι της ζωής σου με ειρήνη και ασφάλεια. Αυτά στην εποχή τη δική μας δεν ήταν πάντοτε δεδομένα. Και στη γενιά που προηγήθηκε της δικής μου γενιάς, όχι μόνο δεδομένα δεν ήταν, αλλά η γενιά αυτή βίωσε τον πόλεμο και από αυτή τη φρικτή ανάμνηση του πολέμου ξεπήδησε η ευρωπαϊκή ιδέα. Αυτό είναι κάτι που δεν πρέπει να το ξεχνάμε ποτέ. Κι όμως όλα αυτά δεν φαίνεται να είναι αρκετά για τη νέα γενιά ώστε να αισθανθεί μέσα της Ευρωπαία. Θα τολμήσω να πω εν μέρη σωστά, γιατί αυτή η γενιά, η πιο μορφωμένη γενιά στην ιστορία της Ευρώπης, αντιμετωπίζει ένα μέλλον εξαιρετικά βέβαιο. Ένα μέλλον ισχνής ανάπτυξης, ανασφαλούς εργασίας ή πλήρους ανεργίας, ένα μέλλον μιας επιδεινούμενης κλιματικής κατάστασης και ίσως το κυριότερο, μια αίσθηση ότι η γνώμη τους δεν μετράει, ότι οι δημοκρατικοί θεσμοί δεν ακούν τη φωνή των νέων. Μπορούμε να τους κατηγορήσουμε γι' αυτό? Πώς μπορεί η σημερινή Ευρώπη να τους προσφέρει τις ίδιες ευκαιρίες που προσέφερε στους γονείς τους? Πώς μπορεί η Ευρώπη να τους κάνει να αισθανθούν ότι το ευρωπαϊκό εγχείρημα τους αφορά? Μπορούμε να χτίσουμε την ευρωπαϊκή τους ταυτότητα μέσα από τις επιτυχίες μας και όχι μόνο τις αποτυχίες μας? Όταν στον Δήμο της Αθήνας πρωτοεκλεγήκαμε το 2010 και αντιμετωπίσαμε μια παρόμοια κατάσταση, μια κατάσταση με αναλογίες, αυτό που επιλέξαμε ως άμεση λύση ήταν να εμπιστευτούμε τους κατοίκους της πόλης και να διαχειριστούμε μαζί τους τα προβλήματά της. Να ακούσουμε τις απόψεις τους, να δούμε τις προτάσεις τους και να προσπαθήσουμε από κοινού να βρούμε και να εφαρμόσουμε λύσεις. Με αυτό τον τρόπο φτιάξαμε δομές φιλοξενίας αστέγων και προσφύγων, 24 ανοιχτά σχολεία που λειτουργούν μετά το πέρας των μαθημάτων ως κέντρα για τις τοπικές κοινωνίες, αντί να μένουν σκοτεινά από το μεσημέρι και μετά. Αναβαθμίσαμε ερημωμένες περιοχές, ανοίγοντας κλειστά καταστήματα και δημιουργώντας κέντρα κοινωνικής επιχειρηματικότητας όπως κάναμε λόγω χάρη στη Δημοτική Αγορά της Κυψέλης, και κέντρα άθλησης, καινοτομίας και αναψυχής, όπως εδώ στο Σεράφειο συγκρότημα. Αυτή είναι η δική μας κοινωνική καινοτομία, για την οποία κερδίσαμε το Ευρωπαϊκό Βραβείο Καινοτομίας το Νοέμβριο. Η συνταγή μας είναι: προώθησε τη συμμετοχή, πίστεψε ότι οι λύσεις μπορεί να βρεθούν παντού, μην αφήνεις καμία ιδέα χωρίς να την εξετάσεις και καμία σοβαρή ιδέα ανεκμετάλλευτη. Και φυσικά κάναμε περισσότερα με λιγότερα. Έτσι όλοι έχουν προσωπική συμμετοχή σε σημαντικά πράγματα που συμβαίνουν στην πόλη και στην κοινωνία μας. Και πιστεύω ότι παραπέρα αυτό μπορεί να συμβεί μέσω των πόλεων σε όλη την Ευρώπη. Μέσω της συμμετοχής του Δήμου μας σε ευρωπαϊκούς φορείς και δίκτυα καταφέραμε να κατανοήσουμε τις κοινές επιδιώξεις της Ευρώπης και προσπαθήσαμε να τις εφαρμόσουμε ή ακόμη και να τις επεκτείνουμε και να τις βελτιώσουμε. Δεν στραφήκαμε όμως στην Ευρώπη μόνο για χρηματοδότηση και για ανταλλαγή καλών πρακτικών. Η σχέση μας μαζί της πρέπει να είναι βαθύτερη και πιο προσωπική. Για μας η Ευρώπη είναι σαν το παιδικό μας φίλο, του οποίου πάντα ζητάμε τη συμβουλή και του οποίου στις δύσκολες στιγμές ψάχνουμε τη συμπαράσταση και τη βοήθεια. Κύριε Επίτροπε, αγαπητές φίλες και αγαπητοί φίλοι, το γνωρίζουμε ότι βρισκόμαστε σε μια κρίσιμη καμπή της ιστορίας της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Έχουμε την ευκαιρία να διαφυλάξουμε όσα καταφέραμε μέχρι σήμερα και να ξεκινήσουμε μια νέα εποχή ανάπτυξης και αυξανόμενης ενοποίησης απέναντι στις ειρήνες του εθνικισμού, του λαϊκισμού και της ξενοφοβίας. Για να το πετύχουμε χρειαζόμαστε μια νέα πολιτική που θα αγκαλιάσει τους νέους, αυτές τις γενιές της εκπαίδευσης, όσους βρίσκονται σε ανάγκη που δεν πρέπει να τους αφήνει πίσω, αλλά και τους οραματιστές που θέλουν να χτίσουν τις επιχειρήσεις και τους φορείς του μέλλοντος. Μια πολιτική όπου η οικονομική ανάπτυξη, η κοινωνική δικαιοσύνη και η προστασία του περιβάλλοντος θα βαδίζουν χέρι-χέρι. Να επιφορτήσουμε λοιπόν αυτούς που είναι οι πιο ικανοί να αντιμετωπίσουν αυτές τις προκλήσεις του μέλλοντος, που είναι πιο κοντά στα προβλήματα και στις μεγάλες λύσεις. Να επιφορτήσουμε και να εμπιστευτούμε κυρίως τις μεγάλες, τις δημιουργικές προοδευτικές πόλεις και περιφέρειες και τους πολίτες τους. Εκεί κυρίως όπου γεννιέται και ανθεί η καινοτομία. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ και εύχομαι καλή συνέχεια.
Καλημέρα σας. I'm George Moscovici, the Deputy Head of the Representation of the European Commission in Greece, and on behalf of the representation I would like to thank the Mayor for his hospitality in this beautiful and modern infrastructure, as well as the Edic of Athens and Mrs. Eleana Theona for her help and support. And I don't want to take much of the time of this citizens' dialogue we're supposed to have with Commissioner Moscovici here in Athens. I just want to present the two gentlemen on the stage. Of course, Nikos Avlonas, you all know him. He is a visiting professor at the Athens University of Economic and Business, and a good friend, if I may, as well as chairman of the Center of Excellence and Sustainability. And of course, a true European, a well-known Philhellene, Commissioner Pierre Moscovici. So I give you the floor, Commissioner, for your introductory remarks, and then let's have a dialogue. Thank you.
Dear Mayor of Athens, professors ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone, dear friends. I would like to first thank you for the invitation in this very impressive venue, which has been financed by EU funds, and for these kind words of introduction. It's always a pleasure for me, a real pleasure to be in Greece, a country that I love, and I come here so often in the last 7 years. Mostly, I'm afraid, for business or for political work, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to exchange with young Greek students and all of you about the current situation as well as the future of the European Union. We are now less than 100 days from the European elections that I believe will be absolutely crucial, decisive for the course of Europe. This will be a defining democratic movement that frames the political priority of the continent for the coming years. And it will be also a very difficult and tough fight. I will come back to that. Our discussion now on the European elections, I think, is therefore timely. It gives us the opportunity to discuss the state of the European Union as well as its future, and I look forward to hearing your views and opinions. But beforehand, I believe that a quick stop in the present is welcome, as Europe is going through a very particular period of its history. I would say that we live in a period of great paradox. On the one hand, the EU is performing well economically. We are clearly out of the economic crisis. But on the other hand, we are facing a crisis as equally and maybe more threatening. It is more a political crisis. We are going out of the economic crisis and entering into the political crisis. Let's start on the first note, the positive one. The economic crisis, I think, is really behind us. And as far as we know, the European economy is doing well. A few weeks ago, I presented the European Commission's economic forecast for the European Union and the Eurozone. Of course, we slightly revised downwards compared to our previous forecast, but still the fundamentals of the European economy remain solid. We are experiencing our 7th consecutive year of growth, which is quite long-lasting cycle. The average public deficit in the EU is below the 1% of GDP threshold, and the employment rate has never been so high, even though this is, of course, uneven. And in some countries like this one, we know that the unemployment rate, especially amongst the youngsters, is still very, very high and way too high, even if it's decreasing in a quite impressive way. Greece's exit from the third financial assistance program on the 20th of August last year, to me, is a particularly strong signal of the recovery of the European economy, not only of Greece, but of Europe as a whole. I know that in the past years we were very close to Brexit. As you know, the European Commission fought against that idea. I always thought that it would have been an historical mistake that Brexit happens, because Greece is the founding country of the European idea, the founding country of democracy, and its place is at the heart of the Eurozone. I could go into more details on Greece's economic situation during our Q&A session, but I would like to insist right now on the good performance of the Greek economy lately. In particular, the authorities have adopted, as you know, a draft budget for 2019 with an impressive budgetary surplus of 3.5% of GDP for 19. And we must remember that this is a country whose deficit fell to 15.1% during the crisis. And this is a fantastic recovery of public finances. And also the country has implemented many of the reforms needed to strengthen the Greek economy. There is still some work to be done. This is one of the messages I came to convey to Prime Minister Tsipras, whom I met a few minutes ago, and I will then, after our dialogue, go to the Parliament also to discuss that. But Greece is undeniably heading in the right direction, and I think that the Greek citizens must be proud of what they've done to recover over this terrible crisis and its sufferings. Despite this good economic outlook, as I said, the EU is now facing a very particular crisis of another kind, a political crisis, potentially more destabilizing than any other ones before in the history of the EU. In my history, in my opinion, one of the starting points is Brexit. The divide between the British authorities and the institutions has been so great that it resulted for the first time in our history in a rupture. I cannot comment on what will happen in the days to come, but what I know is that the EU was presented at the time as a scapegoat and not as a solution, and that Brexit supporters campaigned on the illusory argument of take back control. Whatever scenario prevails on the day of the March 29th, which is deal or no deal, we're in the money time, I would say, I fear that Brexit is an argument that the nationalists will use to campaign against Europe, just as they've done in the past. The political crisis in Europe is now manifesting itself through the breakthrough of nationalist and populist movements, and you have some here, even though weaker than in other parts of Europe. Throughout Europe, at the pace of national polls, European citizens have chosen to express, some European citizens have chosen to express their disappointment regarding the functionment of the European Union, and we must be conscious that we need to address the issue differently. They do so by choosing political groups that are openly hostile to the European project and sometimes against the fundamental values on which the European Union was built. You've got here a party who is far right and whose behavior is sometimes violent, and this is, of course, absolutely unacceptable. In a Europe where nationalist and Eurosceptic formations are progressing, Greece, along with some other countries, fortunately, I would say is an island of pro-European resistance. And it's the merit of the Greek citizens to have acted this way, even through a crisis. Some would have thought that the crisis would have brought the Greece against Europe. No, it's because the Greeks were so pro-European that we could find finally a solution. In times of struggle for the Greek citizens, even when the financial assistance program were, I know, requiring considerable efforts and sometimes too tough efforts, as I said, the European vocation and ambition of Greece has remained solid. Nevertheless, today it is rather a feeling of mistrust towards the European Union which seems to be taking over the rest of the continent, I would say. Today, some member states have started giving priority to national interests. They are fighting or advocating for isolationism over collective and concerted action. Selfishness seems to prevail over solidarity. On many subjects, which are often top priorities and for which European citizens legitimately expect Europe to provide them with effective solutions, consensus between member states within the Council of Ministers, I sit in this council for 7 years now, or the European Council, has become, let's be also frank, quite difficult and increasingly difficult. Given the populist and nationalist threat hanging over Europe, May elections are expected to be the most important and also the most delicate, and let's say that frankly, probably the most dangerous since the election of the European Parliament by direct universal suffrage. It was in 1979, 40 years ago. I do not believe, personally, in the scenario of a populist and nationalist wave with a surge, with a majority, as, for example, Mr. Salvini advocates for. But I do fear that those forces will have a sufficient minority to weaken, or even if it's too high, to paralyze the European Union. This is already the case in the Council on sensitive issues such as migration, asylum, sometimes also on EMU reforms. Moreover, both the European left, and I belong to the European left, and the far right, but that left, the European nationalist left, I don't believe in that, are likely to make significant progress. Some of the conservatives could go to the far right or move close to the far right. And I'm worried about that because I'm a member of the PS, the socialist family, for quite a long time, over 30 years. I've been cooperating with the EPP family, the Conservative family, and both of them shared European values. I see that it's not exactly moving in the same direction, and that, for example, Mr. Orban is still admitted in the EPP, whilst his fight for illiberal democracy is far away from the tradition of Christian democracy which inspired this movement. Europe's maneuverability would therefore depend on weakened central forces between parties that have in common the fact of being pro-European, but maybe only that in common. In my opinion, this is not enough to have an ambitious European agenda. However, I believe that an alternative scenario is still possible, one of a reaction, a positive reaction by pro-European forces, which can come from France, my home country, from Spain, from Greece, and from other sources, of course, and I hope from everywhere. The current threats to our project must lead us to action and to a stronger European commitment, not to resignation, as some seem to be tempted to give in. I will grant you that the possibility of a revival of pro-European forces now seems difficult to foresee today, but we must not give up. We must start now, and we must reverse the trend. A campaign of 100 days, after all, is quite long. An immense responsibility thus rests on the shoulders of European politicians and more generally on those of pro-Europeans. If many Europeans have chosen to turn away from the EU and to prefer Eurosceptic parties, it is not because they are fundamentally opposed to our project. And there is another paradox there. The latest EU-European surveys, the Eurobarometer, even reveals, and this is again one of the paradoxes of this period, that the EU is more appreciated than ever. 68% of EU citizens consider that their country has benefited from EU membership. And this is the highest percentage since 1983. That proves that we need to address the concerns about Europe differently than the populist, but also to be conscious that there is potential support for Europe. I believe that citizens want a stronger Europe, sovereign in the world and capable of protecting them. And that's what we must fight for. This is all the more important as Europe remains undoubtedly the most effective scale of action to meet today's major challenges. Let us take a look around us. I represent the EU Commission at the G20 alongside with President Juncker. And when I'm at the table of the G20, I see Donald Trump for the US, I see Xi Jinping for China, I see Vladimir Putin for Russia, Mr. Modi for India, we're waiting for Mr. Bolsonaro from Brazil, and I see, I would say, the traditional democratic countries represented by Australia, Canada, France, Italy, Germany, Italy Prime Minister, but the rest of the political spectrum sometimes is more ambiguous, and the EU. And it proves one thing, that we live in an era where multilateralism is being called into action and political risks are increasing. And for that, it is only in unity and by building a true European sovereignty that Europe will be able to play its part in the global concert and to protect the 100 million European citizens. And we've got very specific values to defend. This is a continent in which we fight against climate change. This is a continent in which we forbid death penalty. This is a continent in which nobody can be discriminated because of its sex, sexual preferences, its religion, the color of the skin. This is a continent which is green. This is a continent in which social protection is the highest in the world. This is a continent where democracy is the rule, and you, again, in Greece, have founded that. And this is worthwhile fighting for it. We have got a very specific European model. Of course, it is under attack, but I think we need to defend it and to promote it. Let me be very clear. there is still hope as long as the European leaders live up to the ambitions that citizens have to the European Union. As such, the upcoming campaign will be decisive. We only have a few months before the European elections, a few months to formulate ambitious proposals, and a few months to convince Europeans of the value of our common project. I identify, and I will finish by that, several priorities that will be very short, to be at the heart of the upcoming electoral debate, and which I hope will be pursued in the coming years. I will mention just four. First, we must engage in strengthening and revitalizing the European democracy to make Europe an ideal, a vision, a mobilizing project. The fight against the illiberal democrats is absolutely crucial because fighting for freedom on the one hand, respecting the rule of law, and also having representatives elected by citizens must go hand in hand. You can have some liberalism without democracy, and you can have democracy without liberalism. A very interesting essay by Yashamunk shows that. But we must renew, I would say, liberal democracy in the sense of democracy of liberties and freedom. That's the first direction. Then we must renew the link with the citizens by taking concrete actions at the territorial level, by ensuring the protection of fundamental rights, and that all minorities, by building a European defense, by securing our common border. This is about protection, and this is the second priority in my mind. Third priority, the fight against global warming must be one of the absolute priorities for the Europe of tomorrow by promoting a sustainable growth policy that is concerned about climate change. I don't see a Europe which is not ecologist in the future. And finally, I would start by that, but I can also conclude by that. We must do everything we can to reduce the inequalities, because I think that the paradox between the fact that we are out of the economic crisis and that we enter into a political crisis is explained by that. The crisis is over, yes, but the legacies of the crisis are still there, and you know that in Greece. And this has a name: inequalities. The feeling that some have benefited from the economy, that the richest are getting always richer and feeling better, while the poorest and middle class are taken out of the fruits of growth, which is now back. This is absolutely unacceptable. And this is why there is a need, in my mind, but you also can understand where my mindset comes from, conscious of that, that there is a need to protect the most vulnerable for the damage of sometimes brutal globalization, and this is the only way to effectively block nationalist forces. I know that a lot of voters who yesterday voted for the left and center-left now are tempted by nationalism. We must tell them that nationalism is not the answer, but that social protection, a new social protection, is the solution for tomorrow. We still have a lot of work to do, but I'm absolutely convinced that we have the means to relaunch the European project, which with its strengths and with its weaknesses, and I know both, its shadows and lights, and I know both for a very long time. I've been elected for the first time in European Parliament 25 years ago. That's quite a long time. This remains our greatest asset, and we must defend this European project. We must cherish it, we must renew it, and this is, I think, what we have to do, first in the 100 days to come until the European elections, then after the European elections, because it's not the end of the story. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready now to discuss with you.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to have Commissioner Moscovici for this discussion. This is for, and it's one of the great opportunities to have an open dialogue from the University of Piraeus, from the Athens and Dynamic Business University, and I hope it's a very pleasant environment for you this time. So this is an open dialogue, and let's set some very big rules because we're going to have a commissioner for more than half an hour with us. Please do keep questions brief and to the point. General statements that did not include, not include a brief question is not going to be allowed because we need to have an open dialogue and we need to and the opportunity for most of you to have an open dialogue with the Commissioner. I have 1 minute for the question, and please refer your name and the organization or university. Because we also have here people from academia and business together with students. So, understand that before we get started, you have 2 questions for me, Commissioner. And my first question is that a few months ago, actually in August, you served the media that the worst for Greece is over after 8 very difficult years for the country, and that Europe will continue to work with you and for you. That was a very, very strong statement last August. So I would like to ask you what this practically means for the young students we have here, for the middle class of Greece, what we should expect in the next coming months or years to change for them, how Europe will work for them.
Well, first, Greece has recovered its, I would say, natural place at the heart of Europe and at the heart of the Eurozone. Yesterday, I presented, of course, the post-program surveillance report, but also the country-specific report, and it's the first time ever that Greece belongs to the European semester, which is the evaluation of all the Eurozone countries. And let's be clear, what I expect is that Greece becomes a normal country in the Eurozones, benefiting from all rights, all duties also, of belonging there. We now need to go on with the post-program surveillance. For example, we've got a Eurogroup in 10 days from now, on the 11th of March, which hopefully can decide the disbursement of 1 billion euros for SMP and infra profits. We must together build a credible Greece with an economy which creates confidence, where investors come back, they create jobs and growth, especially for the youngsters. Greece, of course, will benefit from all structural funds, from the solidarity of its partners. But I'm confident that Greece will now is already standing on its own 2 feet, with, again, the solidarity and friendship of its partners. But in a way, what has happened is that Greece has now recovered its full place in the family as a normal country. I think this is a country of huge opportunities, and we need to try to value that together.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, it seems that there is hope for the next coming years, because when there was such an austerity all these years, you get used to the austerity and you lose hope, and it's part of the psychology, as you know, in the market. And we need hope, we need positive messages, especially from a person like you. We had a key role in the future of Greece. One more question, if you don't mind, which is a little bit more challenging. Greece needs fast reforms, such improving in the functioning of state, making life easier for business startups, reduction of corporate taxation, and all these things we all know. In unofficial discussions, you know, we have with business, with media leaders and academia, sometimes they say that the Greek state pretends that the reforms are in progress, and Europe pretends that these reforms are taking place. That's, of course, unofficial statements and discussion within the Greek society. But also they know that most of the Greek governments are unable to deliver fully. So can European Commission support, together with Eurogroup, and secure a fast growth for Greece, or at least a growth?
Well, first, the relationship between the Commission, the so-called institution, and the Eurogroup, and the Greek authorities, whatever the government is, have been uneasy in the recent years, let's say so. And because the Commission was seen as an external body trying to impose, you said, austerity or reforms. And for a long time, that's clear, we thought that those reforms were not solid enough. That's why there was a first program, there is a second program, and then a third program. Right. We went through very difficult times. Myself, I'm dedicated to the Greek case in the last 7 years. First as finance minister of my country, France, and then as a commissioner. And at 2 times, we were very, very close to Brexit. I would say summer 2012 and July 2015. Why? Because reforms were not on track.
Right.
And if finally the third program ended with a positive conclusion on the 20th of August, it's because we believe objectively, and we are not always very nice, and we are felt as sometimes too intrusive by some, that, well, the reforms required for Greece to exit the program were made. And especially the fact that Greece delivered the budget with a 3.5 primary surplus whilst the deficit was 15% only 9 years ago is very impressive. This reform effort must go on. But there is one point that you mentioned. So I think that there are real reforms in Greece. It's not over. You need to reform the state, obviously.
Right.
The effort must not be released. There must not be backtracking, but it's going in the right direction. Another point is not only to be pro-reform, it's also to secure the business, to create confidence in the markets. Right. That's the point I discussed with Alexis Tsipras this morning. It's very, very important because what will create a long-lasting recovery and a strong job creation is that investors believe this is a country in which they can rely. Right. I would say, reasonably optimistic. Last time I was here, I think in November, I was invited by the Franco-Hellenic Chamber of Commerce. These are people I know well. These are mostly business from my own country, France. And before the dinner, I had I would say, a close meeting with the most important French business here in Greece. And I can see that they feel that something's happening, that something in the air is much more positive, but it must go on. Yep. So I think that the business and market environment must be secured. And for that, the fact that the reforms go on, and it's not contradictory to social reforms, you can do both. Is very important.
Right. Thank you so much for your honesty, but it's time now to ask questions with the great audience we have. We have students, graduates and undergrads, we have academia, and we have business people. But let's start with students, because the future, it's them, right? It's their future. So let's start with questions. The microphone is there, so we have the first question over there.
Hello to everybody, Mr. Moscovici. My name is Daphne Gregoriades and I am just starting my PhD in economics in University of Piraeus. Except from that, I am a financial analyst at Greek TV Contra channel. The question is, given the uncertainty that investors are currently deal with, where do you believe that is the right moment to Greece to do national elections? Is it in May with European elections or in October to balance the uncertainty of investors? Thank you.
That is a point on which I'm totally incompetent. The moment when elections take place in Greece must be decided by the Greek authorities, and I think that is something about which Prime Minister Tsipras reflects. He didn't give me his final view, and if he would have, I wouldn't make this public. But there are various moments, you mentioned them, and there are probably pros and cons for the elections to take place early or late. So, but one thing I can feel, and after that I'm going to the European Parliament, to the National Parliament, is that you're already in a pre-electoral climate here in this country. And I know what elections are about, because I'm a politician myself. I've been elected 20 years in the national and European parliaments. I've been a minister 7 years. Pre-election climate is always a bit tough and tense, but it must not go against the idea of reforms in the country. And there must be a kind of consensus between mainstream parties. I don't know who will govern the country after the elections, that reforms have to be protected and that there must not be a backtracking. This is about the credibility not of Syriza or New Democracy, but about the country. And when you're a politician conscious of your responsibilities, you think, of course, about your party, but first about your country.
Thank you. We have another question over there.
Good evening, Commissioner, and thank you for your wonderful speech. My name is Yorgos Verdi. I'm an undergraduate at the University of Piraeus, and I'm also representing the Hellenic Foundation for European Foreign Policy. My question is the following. Most likely, after the May elections, Manfred Weber will be the new president of the European Commission. So my question is, do you believe that he will be able to manage successfully the complex emerging political environment that you described? And do you think he can be as successful as President Juncker? Thank you.
Don't think it's because I'm a social democrat myself that I would be more cautious than you are. But I think you're jumping a bit fast to conclusions. Because Manfred Weber is a very respected and respectable politician. He is the Spitzenkandidat, the head of the list of the EPP, which is the strongest party in the European Parliament, which can also be the strongest party in the next European Parliament. But there are a lot of uncertainties about who is going to be the next president of the European Commission, because the Spitzenkandidat are a criteria, but there are other criteria. The European Council might wish to take back control, as I said, about the nomination of the President of the European Commission. So is a name, but there are other names, and there might be names that nobody imagined now as a President of the European Commission. So no, I wouldn't bet my money, neither in favor or against Mr. Weber. First, let's have the elections, then we will see. But I think it will be a very delicate situation. And when I look at the odds in Brussels, well, he is among those who could be President of the Commission, but, well, there is no clear favorite at the time being. So let's not imagine that it's done. It's even not half done. It has to be built, and we don't know. Then, if I don't want to be too personal, neither in favor or against, I would say, what are the qualities of a President of the Commission? Somebody who is a truly dedicated European, somebody who can build consensus between various forces, and there will be a need for consensus, because there won't be a clear majority in the next European Parliament. Until now, two parties always had the majority together, EPP and PS. It won't be the case. You will probably need to have not a coalition, but consensus, or at least a working program between 3 or 4 parties. You had the Liberals and the Greens, so you need to have somebody with consensus. You need to have somebody with vision and who has really a clear idea of the way forward for Europe, with ambition. And so everybody can reflect on who has this profile. I wonder if Mr. Weber has this capacity as a whole. And I think in the end, the European Council will try to find the best person to build this consensus. And finally, of course, and this is why the Spitzenkandidat principle is there and must be respected, you need to find a majority in the European Parliament for the Commission. So, well, great uncertainty. And I'm not going to comment on Mr. Weber's strengths. He's, again, a respected politician, respectable politician. The only thing I would say is that, as I said, I think personally there are too many contradictions inside the EPP, and that the EPP must be clear on its European view. Again, I'm not EPP, I'm PS myself. And I respect the EPP as such, but frankly, I prefer the traditional Christian Democrat, pro-European way, than more ambiguous rightist stance, who sometimes are very close to far right. And when Mr. Orban, for example, is pinpointing George Soros or Jean-Claude Juncker with clear anti-Semitic or anti-European views, I would like the EPP to say, this is not my party. The President Juncker said that. I would like Mr. Weber to say clearly, no, Mr. Orban is not in my political family.
So one thing is definitely sure, that the job of the new president is not working. Of the European Commission is going to be one of the most challenging jobs in the earth as we speak.
It will be a challenging job and one of the most important jobs on earth.
At the same time, thank you. Okay, we're going to get more questions, hopefully relevant to the future of Greece and future of Europe. So we have one question.
Good morning, Commissioner, and thank you for your speech. My name is Dimitris Psiris. I'm a student at the University of Piraeus. You made a point in your speech, you were talking about the rise of nationalism and populism in Europe. So, we perceive Europe as a relationship with obligations and privileges. However, some countries like the Visegrad, the Poland, for example, only take the privileges. However, they say nothing about their obligations. They do not get their share of the immigrants and the refugees, for example. So, what measures and actions do you think should be taken about these countries? And what kind of example would you like to set for the rest of us? Thank you.
This is clearly a difficulty. As I said, we already have some blockage in the Council, and that's what I was thinking about as far as the migration or asylum question is raised. And your commissioner, my friend Dimitris Avramopoulos, is in charge of that in the Commission. The Commission, I think, has made the right proposals, especially the relocalization process. And we must put pressure on all countries so that they respect their commitments. And this is one also of the points that need to be solved after the European elections. And there is another point, which is a bit different, but which is interlinked, is the fact that all EU countries need to respect the rule of law. And this is not the case, in our view, for two of those countries. One is Poland, the other one is Hungary. And this is why, as well, the European Commission and the European Parliament have raised what we call Article 7 against those two countries, because rule of law means that, and that is one of the great acquis of the European Union, you can have an independent press, a free press. You must have an independent justice. And the freedom of the press and the independence of the judicial systems are two very important criteria which are part of the European identity. And you cannot have anti-Semitism, you can have discriminations for homosexuals, etc. And so this is why we must be very firm on the rule of law. So let's try to find solutions for burden sharing on migration and asylum, and let's also be very frank, clear on the rule of law.
Hello, my name is Nafsika Hanyoti and I'm a postgraduate student to the University of Piraeus. Well, my question has to do with our generation's future. We've seen more or less that there is a failure by the European Commission to show how it can affect practically and positively our lives and careers. And especially here in Greece, where we have one of the highest youth unemployment, as you said, we need to know what you can do in order to help us. And I do not mean in the future, but in the next upcoming months and in a practical way, not in a theoretically. Thank you.
Yes, you spoke about the Commission's failure. The Commission is certainly not perfect. But one thing you must understand is what the Commission is. The Commission is not the government of Europe. The Commission has powers, but doesn't have all the powers. And the problems have to be solved together. The Commission is trying to be an honest broker and a problem solver, but the key is always in the member states. The Greek crisis was not created by EU or by the Commission. It started with problems with public finances, which are dishonest, with public accounts which were fake, with a state which was not capable to address the issues. And we had, and you had first, because you saw that, to create those reforms that create a new, reliable Greece. And that's what is at stake now. It's on the good track. This work needs to be finished and completed. And so I'm afraid to say that the options that you have as youngsters depend mostly on the economic situation in this country. And what we can do is, I would say, indirect, is not to consider youth as a category, but to create opportunities for the country, so that there are jobs created for young people here, but it depends mostly on the success of the country. Our job thus is indirect, is to encourage the country, to help it to get out of the crisis definitely. For the rest, we have also specific programs for the youth, and one I would mention is very important for students, of course, is Erasmus. And when you look at the next multi-financial framework, we propose to double the credits of Erasmus so that twice more students can go abroad to complete their training, and I think this is absolutely decisive. But what you're right to say is that there are students here. The drama for some countries in Europe is that the brightest of the youngsters leave the country because they don't have any options here. And this is true for Portugal. This is true for Greece. And for other countries too. And so the key is to rebuild countries which are strong enough to offer in their homeland future for the youngsters. We are trying to help to create that climate. This is decisive. One point on which I'm very optimistic with Greece is that, you know that, I think you are at the University of, but also in the US,
Yes, also the University
of Chicago, is that there is a Greek diaspora who is so attached to its country that the youngsters want to come back here. So at least that's a chance.
Great. We have time for two more brief questions because the Commissioner needs to go to the parliament. So two more questions, yes.
Hello, Mr. Commissioner. Very nice speech so far. I am Vangelis Ververelis for MBA International. I would like to ask a question about something that you just mentioned. During the crisis, we have the famous brain drain. A lot of young generation from our generation, like myself, we left the country, and especially European Union, to go to work abroad. What is the plan for the European Commission and the European Union in order to bring back those professionals in the European Union and in the Hellenic Republic? Thank you.
This has been addressed partly. Yeah. No, it's a successful Greece. You are going to come back, or you came back because you feel that there is opportunities. So again, everything that you said finally is interlinked. Having a country with reforms, with a business and market environment which is more secure, with investors attracted here, gives the opportunity to create jobs, and especially for the youngsters, and then to reverse the brain drain. Greece is no secret, has a huge capacity as far as brain is concerned. It's historical, but it's still present today. You know that, so it's better to use it here.
Right. And the last question.
Good morning to all. Thank you for being here with us, Commissioner. My question was partially covered. My name is Stella Fine. I am a Deputy Supply Chain Manager of Royal Canin in Greece and also an MBA student in the Athens University of Economics and Business. My question was partially covered by Vangelis. It was actually about a stable business environment in Greece and guidelines which might come from EU to have a more stable taxation in order to attract the investors from abroad. So what is a general comment from you? Thank you.
Again, I will insist on what the Commission is and what the Commission is not. We are sometimes seen as too intrusive. Especially when a country is in program or even in post-program. We must not be over-intrusive. And taxation, and I'm Commissioner as well for economy, taxation and customs. Taxation is a point on which the role of the Commission is not to dictate to member states what they have to do, but to give the framework. And for example, myself, I fought against tax fraud and tax evasion. I proposed 14 directives to do that. I proposed that there is a digital taxation so that internet giants pay their fair share of tax where they create values and profits. But I cannot and don't want to dictate any country the way it should create their own tax systems. But still, I have a bit of experience. What is a good tax system? A good tax system is simple, is stable, is a tax system that authorizes business to work and create jobs. And it's a tax system which is fair. So, not too much, the more simple, the fairer as possible, and then the country moves on. But these are very general, not guidelines, but my personal experience as somebody who has been in that kind of political and public affairs for quite a long time.
Great. Thank you so much for your great comments and for your contribution to this dialogue. And thanks to George Moscovici, who organized the whole thing. So a great thank you for
we're
being
almost
here with us.
He has the same name as me, so
yeah,
it helps.
Right.
I'm much younger than you are, so that's. I cannot be your dad still.
So, please, one last comment about the future of Europe, the future of Greece, from this discussion.
Well,
or hope. Give us hope.
On the one hand, we've got to fight the threats that we see. Nationalism, populism, we must avoid any kind of backtracking, we must go on creating a positive economic environment. But I know now this country well. In the last 7 years I've come here, I think something like 13 times. Some newspapers even think I come too often. No, I'm just doing my job. And sometimes also I came privately. Right. But this is a country of opportunities. This is a country where there is a huge human resource and natural assets. And we know that the Greeks are people who are innovative, creative, and that can seize these opportunities. And this is why, if reforms go on, if the proper business environment is finally created, I'm very optimistic for Greece. And I would just like to wish you the fate of other countries which existed the program. Right. When I look at Ireland on the one hand, when I look at Portugal on the other hand, I see that they are now in a quite impressive boom. Right. That they were capable of creating attractiveness. When I go to Lisbon, which is also a country, a city I love, I see a transformation every time I go there. So this is what I wish you, wish for Greece. I think that Greece is now, I would say, a normal country inside the Eurozone. You can be more than normal. You can be one of the best and brightest.
We need these comments and, create a more positive psychology and be more optimistic for the future. Thank you so much.
You should be confident in this country because you have huge talents, and this is very sincere.
Here we are. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to continue 10 minutes with the debrief of this discussion and comments. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Yeah, from the seats, that's fine. So we have Chris Allen, which is the representative in Athens of the European Commission, Directorate General for Economic and Financial Affairs. And unofficially, we're going to continue the discussion and have a debrief for the next 10 minutes. I'm also going to ask Eric Soderquist, which is the head of the IMBA, International MBA of the Athens Economic and Business University, to join us in this debrief for the next 10 minutes. And also Ms. Koraka, which is from the corporate world. So we're going to have a mix of, European Commission, academia, and corporate world. So you can all sit, wherever you are. And please join me here. No, please join me all together here. There is one more chair we need. One more chair? Yes. Yes, one more chair. That's fine. Please. So again, this discussion, it's now unofficial. so we can all express our point of view. And I'm going to start from Greece. So Greece, your point of view again unofficially about the future of Greece, the future of Europe, and your point of view.
Okay, well, I must say...
You need to open that first. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we got to the first stage.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, I must say, like the Commissioner, I'm rather optimistic about Greece. I think we
can take a leading role globally.
We cannot build a society if we don't find compromise.
Nous devons nous occuper de l'Afrique, raison pour laquelle la Commission a lancé un plan d'investissement extérieur de 44 milliards pour combattre les raisons qui font que les Africains fuient leur continent.
You are the best educated, the healthiest, the best connected, the most international, most European generation in European history.
We cannot have the legislative.
Urgently more with the Secretary of State.
Siamo adesso insieme.
Et c'est cela qui a changé la façon de faire.
The European Union.
Working conditions, animal welfare, human rights.
Ways of maintaining